Okay, folks, come on. Let's stay standing. We're gonna call this meeting to order. Our secretary has taken attendance. And if you remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So we have, I believe, Karen Trinkle, Dr. Trinkle, who is going to provide us with a K through 3 literacy update. And for those of you who heard and watched her last presentation, we're pretty excited because it was pretty good. And I think she's got a lot more information to share with us tonight, and I appreciate that.
There we go. Yes, we do have some exciting information. Thank you for the opportunity to come back and present this information. We made an amazing amount of progress, and we're really excited to share an update for you. We have an unbelievable opportunity here to shift our focus to positive student outcomes. And with that, focus on continuous improvement, feedback on our progress using school improvement models and data and metrics are all in our areas of focus. Before we get into the amazing work that our committee has accomplished in a short period of time, I wanted to take a moment and highlight a generous donation that was provided by the Lehigh Valley Educators Credit Union. You see that tonight that was offering the amount of $5,000 specifically donated to the Southern School District, and I wanted to take a moment publicly and thank them for that generous donation. You'll see tonight how we're going to be able to leverage that donation to support this initiative for K-3. So tonight we have Mr. Mansfield with Dr. Cognac and Mr. Shane Cross, who will provide an update on the phonics process that we use for our selection of vendor, our next steps for implementation and professional development, and then a brief update on MTSS and tiered intervention. So I wanted to thank them for coming this night, tonight. All were the integral members of the team to get this to where we are today. So Mr. Cross will provide an update and
Well, thank you, Dr. Trinkle, and thank you to the board as well for this opportunity to speak to you this evening about a very important and exciting process, which is to create the best K-3 program we could possibly create. Putting a systematic approach to phonics instruction in place at the K-3 level is critical to this goal. And I'm very happy to be able to report tonight on this process that we have done. The committee was established at the beginning of November, and it included stakeholders such as teachers, special education, specialists, instructional coach, and administrators. And I would like to, at this time, thank everyone who has been involved in this process. It really was a team effort, and we wouldn't be here before you this evening talking about this progress if we didn't all put our heads together collectively and come up with what we feel is going to be a great opportunity for our students moving forward. A list of high-quality phonics resources aligned with the science of reading were compiled through research and recommendations made by our specialists as well as administrators. Vendor presentations took place on January 13th. There was a full day of comprehensive presentations and opportunities for our committee members to provide feedback at the conclusion of that day. Vendors were then asked to provide detailed information specific to the science of reading, based on the Reading League's curriculum evaluation tools. Online access was also provided for committee members to see sample lessons and explore the resources in depth. And then committee members reconvened on several occasions as a full committee, as well as within buildings, to process the information, reflect further, review sample resources. The committee identified for that process 2 resources that they felt that had met or could meet students' needs for the district. On February 18th, the committee gathered for a final review of those resources, and the committee further reviewed the resources, received clarification on targeted questions and have robust conversations with the vendors of those two resources. At the conclusion, feedback was collected from all committee members, and ultimately, the educators selected Foundations to support phonics as a supplemental core resource. Administration supports this selection as well as consideration for additional codables, GEOs, that would support the application of phonics skills and allow for fluency building. Foundations would be used as a tier 1 full class general education setting as one part of it and as a complement to the core. Foundations is delivered as a preventative program and with opportunities to differentiate for all of our students. We're in the processes of solidifying our plans for spring and fall 2022 to ensure successful implementation. The goal would be to build the capacity of our staff for implementation as well as sustainability. We are collaborating with Wilson Language to develop a comprehensive professional development plan. It's all our goal to provide both virtual and in-person experiences utilizing Wilson Language as well as our team. Our first professional development with Wilson Language on Foundations K-3 is reserved for April 14th. Teachers will also gain access to the Wilson Academy, which is an online learning platform with a whole host of support, such as but not limited to professional online courses, complete lesson videos, planning guidance, instruction materials, resources, expert tips, and an online community for them to be able to ask questions from other teachers using the Foundation's resource. May 27th in service will be reserved for continued review of resources and any additional follow-up. Administration is working towards building a comprehensive professional development plan that extends into the 2022 and 2023 school year and engaging in discussion about purchasing resources and supplements for each grade level. Having a solid tier 1 for instruction is essential to ensure that students are successful. It's like the foundation of your home. And this process of selecting a phonics resource has led to further reflection of our tiered levels of support, including tier 2 and tier 3. We have new staff and we have new building administration, which provides an ideal opportunity to reflect on our processes for our K-3 reading MTSS. Collaboratively, we have established clear enter and exit criteria for movement within the tiers. We have refined the resources that were used to provide targeted support for tier 2 and tier 3. And moving forward, we will continue collecting and reviewing data to ensure supports are targeted to students' needs, as well as to refine our goal setting for progress monitoring. We want to ensure that our goals are time-bound and based on growth rates. As we work to refine our K-3 reading MTSS, putting a systematic phonics resource foundations into place is essential in building a comprehensive K-3 literacy program. This allows our team of educators to intervene in a preventative approach. With that, I will turn it back to Dr. Trinkle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. So as you can see, we have made a large amount of progress in solidifying not only a vendor, but developing professional development to support our teachers, and planning continues to be underway. Through that, we are laser focused again on student outcomes and positive student achievement, using our high leverage learning environments to capitalize on that. We're going to continue to analyze those trends, evaluate our resources to make sure that we're utilizing all of our resources appropriately in tier 1, 2, and 3. And that planning is continuous and ongoing. We want to thank you for the opportunity to provide that update this evening. Again, thank you to the team members. It has been an exciting experience, to say the least, to start my time here at Southern Lehigh School District to do this in such a positive direction. So I appreciate all of our work. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Dr. Trinkle. Thank you for the presentation. You and Shane appreciate that. I did have just 1 or 2 questions about the phonics, which I'm very encouraged to see. Would somebody correct me if I'm wrong? No, hadn't phonics fallen sort of out of favor over the last 5 to 10 years, or am I crazy about that? Right?
There was something called, I should not interject, but I'm going to jump in. All right, do you remember there was a thing called the reading?
And I'm not just saying within Southern Lehigh, I'm saying, I thought nationally
there was, I'm gonna stop
Okay.
after this, but I'm just gonna take this one and stop, right? There was this thing called the reading wars, right?
Right.
And this has been a long slog of fighting back and forth. And because there was the rise some years ago, maybe even longer than 5 or 10, but of this whole language issue that really departed a long way from phonics. And now there may be some who disagree, but that reading war, it has ended.
Okay.
All right. And
Phonics
has won.
Okay. Good.
Phonics has prevailed. Now, to the extent that it is strictly phonics, and again, this is a supplemental program.
Right.
We are not going to teach phonics all day, every day, and that's going to be how we teach kids to read.
Okay.
This is a brief supplemental program that will be on every day that is the thing to do.
Okay.
And if you look around, you may find people who are still perhaps not big on phonics, but I will tell you, and this is very hard to say in education, because you can find a study to support whatever you want to do, they're wrong, all right? Because we must be doing phonics as a component to teaching our kids to read.
Music to my ears.
And
I'm on Team Phonics.
So that's it. I'm done. I'm done. And you can correct me if I said anything wrong there.
Wise answer.
The truth is that Dr. Mann started this, and I was able to kind of come in with the process and framework pretty much underway with a focus on phonics. And he is correct that reading wars is kind of over. And we are going to focus on phonics. And it is about 20 to 25 minutes per day of core instruction. So it is a smaller component, but it's such an integral component.
So I appreciate that. I did not coordinate that with Dr. Mahan, but I certainly am happy I am of the same opinion that phonics is important. I'm happy to see us move in this direction more so, not that we haven't been there. My second question, I think you're answering it. When I see MTSS and intervention, maybe I was getting the impression that this was, I just wanted to know, is this something that's being implemented broadly into the curriculum, the daily curriculum for all students, or is this something that's being utilized for specific interventions, or is it a combination of the two?
It is for core, so it is integrated in the core. So there are other layers of intervention in tier 2 and tier 3. Simultaneously with this new addition to our core, we thought it critical to take a close look at what we were doing in tier 2 and tier 3. So simultaneously we did two things. We adopted phonics resource and streamlined our tier interventions for a more strategic approach, K to 3. And that was done simultaneously and purposely.
Wonderful. I think it's encouraging. I'm excited about that. Thank you for the hard work for you and the committee. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I think one of the first meetings Dr. Mann and I had, I brought up phonics, and he had already been on the prowl for that program, and I'm a huge fan of it. And just to say, as a case in point, now I am not a spring chicken. My brother is 2 years younger than me, and I have to say I was in the phonics program in the school district where I grew up, and they changed it between when he and I were in school. And he had, of course, he has a master's in engineering, but he had issues with reading for a long time as kids and picking that up. And just as a case in point, I feel that it's a great way to go, and I'm really happy. I mentioned it in the last meeting, and I'll continue to do so because I think it's important.
Thank you. I just wanted to quickly ask about the professional development of this program. Is every instructor, every aide going to be involved in receiving
Yes.
training in this program?
The classroom teachers will be receiving the professional development. We'll integrate instructional aides as we see fit according to what the implementation looks like. We haven't delineated the full complement of professional development. We've designed the first 2 days, and we'll be looking into next year for that full integration.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, what's the plan for measurement in terms of the performance and how kids are progressing versus how they have in the past? And I say that because I'm not sure exactly what program we were using when we moved here in 2000. But at that time, it seemed like the children were really learning well. There was the competition for reading and such. And it was really, I think, one of the strengths of the district. And it sounds like we're getting back to that because I think we left it for a little bit.
Correct. And we use Acadian, which is STAR. We do that periodically to assess growth and mastery of components of phonics, comprehension, writing, and all of those other components. We don't just focus on phonics with STAR. We also use DIBELS, which is another assessment tool that we use to assess growth. There are other common informative assessments within the classroom that teachers use as well. But those are the two in-house assessments that we use to assess more regularly, like progress monitoring, to see if what we're doing is actually working. And we're seeing the outcomes that we would like to see with the instruction we're providing. So we do use that. And that we're still kind of collecting that information to get a 3-year picture of where we were and where we are right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and your team for your expeditious development and implementation. It's pretty impressive. Okay, with that, we have public comments. William Schindler. Am I saying your name correctly?
You're not. Schindler.
Schindler.
K through 12, not a single teacher sector.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay? Almost a year ago, I spoke to the board regarding the failure of former Superintendent Edison to answer even basic questions about the district's DEI activities. That failure directly led to me submitting a request for records and PA Regs No. 1. There have now been 3 separate decisions by the Office of Open Records against the district in just 12 months. 3 adverse decisions in 12 months should tell you just how deep a hole the district has dug for itself in this area. The district must ask whether it's received effective counsel on right to know matters because a lot of time and a lot of taxpayer dollars have been needlessly wasted. The 3rd decision came just 10 days ago. There were 6 issues on appeal. The district lost on 5 out of 6 issues. Among other things, the OOR, the Office of Open Records, held that the district applied a standard for redactions that doesn't even exist under PA law and failed to do proper search for documents despite having 6 months to have gotten it right. Some of the things I found triggered an investigation by outside counsel. I was told by the investigating attorney that the report was complete back in September or October of last year. We haven't seen it. The previous board sat on that report, hiding it from the public despite compelling public interest involved. Thankfully, this new board has moved toward releasing the report. I wish to state very clearly what I believe the public is owed after all of this. First, the public is owed a complete copy of the investigation report and all of its attachments, including any rebuttal statements. The board must waive attorney-client privilege on the entire report and should only redact information that is specifically required to be withheld by law. And if redactions are made, the district should cite the specific statute that compels them to make that redaction. Waiving attorney-client privilege is entirely within the board's discretion. Second, the report should be released as soon as possible, by the end of this week at the very latest. There's nothing else to be done. The report is complete, and it has been for at least 5 months. The period for rebuttal statements expired today, as I understand from Attorney Levin, with whom I've spoken with a couple of times during the process. If the board needs to take a vote to accomplish these things, it should do so tonight, during the new business section of this meeting. A motion, a second, a vote to waive privilege and get that report in. I beg you to embrace openness as I have in the past and begin to rebuild credibility that the previous board and the previous superintendent damaged so badly. Thank you.
I just want to report that we had an executive session this evening prior to the workshop meeting to go over some litigation matters and a personnel matter. Thank you.
We have minutes from February 14th for the board meeting and the workshop. So we need a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes approved.
Thank you. Under Superintendent's report, we request the board to approve the 2022-2023 school district calendar.
I had a couple of questions. Yeah, hold the court.
Well, we need a motion.
Oh, so moved.
Okay, go ahead with your comments.
The weeks of conferences. I know that we have greatly reduced the time frame for elementary to have conferences, which in and of itself is very concerning to me because I don't know how the teachers are going to meet with all those parents in time. But I'm also very concerned that on the high school and middle school level, that they are only going to have about 3 hours, I'm guessing, of conferences because they're going to have one evening set of conferences, right? Because they don't have any of the half days, so they won't be any after school. So they'll have like about 3 hours to squeeze
Correct.
in all of the parents that want conferences.
That is correct.
Okay, so where my real concern comes in there is that's a first come, first serve sign up. And I don't know, I think that that's doing a disservice to a lot of families that really probably need to talk to those teachers that you're only giving a 3-hour window to, and it's first come, first serve. So it's whoever's sitting poised over their computer when it goes live that get to have those conferences. And what about the people that really need them that aren't going to be able to have them? I don't know. I'm concerned about the amount of time that we're allotting to conferences, and we are trying to promote a whole home and school connection, and this seems to be cutting that off because we're not allowing the parents to meet with their teachers, and they're, I have concerns. I'm not saying that this won't work. I'm saying that I'm very concerned that we're going to have a lot of people fall through the cracks, and I'm concerned about the fairness of who gets to have those secondary conferences, and I'm concerned about the elementary teachers trying to cram what they were already having a hard time handling in volume of parents in such a shortened time frame. I am concerned.
Dr. Mahone, do you have any anecdotal feedback from the principals on the quantity of, for example, the secondary conferences and how many are actually being utilized, and if that's an issue, and or with the elementary, if there are challenges there?
Yeah, and certainly the time will be compressed for conferences. There's no question about that. Dr. Trinkle, do you want to offer any thoughts on?
We did develop these recommendations in collaboration with building administration before making this recommendation for reduction in conferences at the secondary level and then reduction in conferences at the elementary level. With that, there would be a more strategic approach. I had lengthy conversations more specifically with the secondary principals in how to provide access and opportunity for those parents who would require standard like what you're talking about. In addition to evening conference would be contact and outreach leading up to that event, and that the conferences should not be the only time our educators, administrators, or support staff are reaching out to families, should it be an academic or social emotional concern. So that's where the recommendation came from in collaboration.
So you're suggesting then that there should actually be an increase in teachers and parents communicating that will kind of counterbalance the lack of conference time?
And that's already happened. That is already happening in our buildings regarding academic progress or lack thereof, or any other concerns that the conference time should not be the first or the only time family members or parents or guardians are receiving information that would be concerning, which is where the recommendation and why the recommendation was made.
Thank you. I actually, applaud the administration for kind of, having the kids in school a little bit more during that time. The concern that I had with how this calendar was made was taking away after the 4 days, the 4 traditional snow days, on the 5th day, then taking away April 5th and 6th, which is the spring break.
Right.
I would prefer we add those days at the end of the year to a point where it would, not affect graduation, and then move on to spring break or flexible instruction days.
Right.
Just because I think it's important, for we talked a little bit last time, I think at the last workshop, how families plan for certain breaks. We don't really get a full week spring break like many other, other
Right.
districts or other states
Right.
do. So I think that's important time for our families and our students and our teachers as well.
And I think
Yeah.
that you were doing that probably to help settle, I think, the
Well,
debate
yes.
that we had going on with June versus during the school year, the
Yeah.
concerns raised regarding having that education occurring that made up time during, before the benchmarks. I mean, I agree. I was going to ask, actually, now that we've gotten rid of some half days, whether we could potentially have a longer spring break. I've always wondered myself historically, because I don't know why we don't have a full week. And I would agree, chipping into that one long weekend, really.
No, and you're right, Dr. Serene, this was my effort to
Yeah,
try
you're trying
to
to compromise.
reconcile the various very valid views that were expressed at our last meeting. Because it struck me, it is true that adding days to June are perhaps not of the highest value given the temperature and the excitement that's inherent at the end of the school year. However, I took to heart the idea that, and I fully accept and embrace the idea that being in school is where we truly need to be. So it jumped out that day before the holiday, the teachers are in already. And so from respective employees who had plans, they're going to be here anyway. And yes, that could be an imposition on students. But in order to achieve the goal and not have it roll into those time of year where it's very hard to concentrate late in June, I figured, well, that would be it. And so no one would have a wrong viewpoint here. And I certainly actually accept all of the points that are being made, but in looking at all the various points of view, that's just where I happened to land to try to come to a compromise that I thought was reflective of the information that was presented.
I will say, if you're talking about adding days and taking away days off, that I would think that 2 days in April would be way more beneficial to the teachers than the last 2 days in June, simply because that's lost time for PSSAs and for all of the other instruction that they're putting on. 2 days in June isn't really educating our kids in school. The 2 days in April is.
And I'll add some historical context because this sounds remotely familiar to a conversation we had many years ago when we first went to a schedule where we were pulling days earlier in the year versus adding days on in June. And it was all about instruction. And it was not too long after my oldest graduated in 2012 and learning what took place around the AP once the test was done. And there's very little instruction, solid core instruction that takes place after that. And having those days earlier to get the students ready and carving back in whatever snow days were missed so that they're more meaningful was much more valuable than, sitting in classrooms staring out the window in June.
I agree with the last two comments. I think, we did ask you to go back and try and thread the needle. I think you have. I think, one, I support also the changes to the conference schedule, but two, None of this, to your point a moment ago, none of this is ideal. There's certainly, there's valid points made regarding spring break, but I think at the end of the day, if we're going to focus on what is most valuable to the students and education, I think I was persuaded with the comments about June at the last meeting that it is probably more important to have them in school earlier. There were some comments by the teachers regarding AP tests and whatnot. And so I would be of the mind that this, while not perfect, I think is the best compromise created. I certainly, I support it for that reason.
I want to thank Dr. Trinkle and the administrators, because I said, well, we need less half days. I want this to work. So I do, want to thank them for really doing it, because my first version was a complete disaster. And so thanks to them for putting this together.
I actually had a question about the half days with the increased instruction time. Are those just adding hours of instruction? My understanding is by eliminating half days, we're just adding hours of instruction. Is that a correct understanding, or is there a balancing going on somewhere else where we're using those days off somewhere else? It's just, they don't count for an increased number of school days because a half day still counts as a day. But we're just increasing hours of instruction. Is that what?
That's like, we're not like counting them halves and then taking
Right, no,
over the holiday perhaps.
Right, no.
So, no, these are very real gains to instructional time. I think 3 at the high school level and 2 at the elementary level. So these are actual gains of instructional time.
And
we're not banking for some other.
No, I was just curious. I was just making sure I understood that correctly, because there's a day count and an hour count. Yeah. And I guess my concern with the half days, I appreciate the increase in instruction time, and I think a full day of instruction probably helps more than a half day, because everybody's just looking at the clocks to see when noon is. So even with that elimination, I can appreciate that and increased hours of instruction. My concern does revolve around the conferences, in that I understand there are plans to address those who are truly in need. And I understand that, and I appreciate that. And I think teachers do a really good job of reaching out to those kids who are struggling. And I think an increased focus on that has happened in recent times, and we've learned more and are better able to do that. I have a concern for, I think, one of those predictors of success and predictors of school community success. We talk about communication being so important. I struggle with this calendar, with the reduction of conferences, because I think I fear that, I have a concern that those students kind of in the middle who would not necessarily hit a teacher radar, and there wouldn't be a need, or those students who are really excelling, I still have a concern that conferences and that, I think that face-to-face connection, we talk about a face-to-face connection in the classroom being so important. I've heard parents say they get a lot and they get to know the teacher by sitting down face-to-face, even for a few minutes with a conference. So I have concerns about that. But I appreciate the additional instruction hours. As far as carving away vacation time, I think when we talk instructional time, we need to address, there are certain efficiencies and inefficiencies in classrooms. And I think when we have well-rested staff and students and parents who can plan a calendar, I think there's something to be said for the quality of a day you get when you aren't thinking, I could have had this day off as a vacation day. I think it helps teachers plan for their vacations and their lesson plans. I think that's what we've heard our teachers say. I think it helps parents plan. And so I'd really rather not carve away days around set-aside holidays for that reason. And I think a virtual instruction day, well-placed is a good compromise. We're talking about compromise here, and I wouldn't want to support a calendar that takes away vacation days for that reason.
Dr. Mann, can you just comment, so when is graduation if the last student day is on the 7th of June?
Well, hope for help. Maybe Mrs. Scariello, do you know when? Not you know when, of course you do, but.
Just looking at the calendar, and the last teacher day is the 8th, which I believe is Thursday, in front of me.
Yep.
We do need staff to attend graduation. We frankly just need the help to move kids and practice kids, so we cannot have graduation after the staff leaves. It's really, truly, I couldn't imagine it. So if we are going to keep graduation on the Friday prior, which has been this district's decision, the board's decision, as long as I've been here, then that would make that the 2nd, would be the Friday night. for graduation. Next year, we're talking about the 22-23 calendar, correct?
Correct.
This year it's the 3rd, but next year it will be the 2nd. Correct.
So just adding those days to June, how does that affect?
Graduation.
Yeah, or does it?
We can't, because we need to outsource graduation, we need to sign the contract in December, which is why I presented the options to the board this past September. So we need to know where we're going to have graduation, because all the schools are fighting for the same venues. And so we need to have that decision and the contract with the venue prior to the holidays. So that's pretty much a fixed date.
Mrs. Gurriel, the 2nd is not the last student day.
No, it's the last Friday before the staff leaves.
Seniors, the tradition you're talking about is that seniors graduate. The senior last day is before all the rest of the students' last day.
That is how it's been done in the past. And the reason because the board had always wanted a Friday night graduation, and we need the staff there to staff graduation.
Right. Well, there
And that can change. That's-
there are very clear subsidy issues that are
Yes.
related to that I would be very hesitant to say that we don't have our students, all students should complete 180 days of instruction. And again, if it has to be on a Friday, I mean, we could pay people to come back or move it to a Thursday, but I would say we would have to further discuss in detail cutting our seniors loose prior to their completion of 180 days.
And Dr. Trinkle just said that that would be the 180 day on the 2nd.
Well, then, good job, right? Let's have them out and we have a good, yeah. So I would be all for that. So I was mistakenly thinking it was the 7th. So as long as that's the case, if we're out on the 2nd, then that's perfect.
You account for 184 student days in our calendar. So we have.
Perfect. Thank you. I got very nervous there for no reason.
Well, we do account for that 184 mark.
Yeah.
So we build those days in. So theoretically, if we don't go beyond that, and we were counterbalance of construction, it would still be in excess. We chose to go that direction.
All right. So this actually works out very well then.
So just,
No surprise, Dr. Trinkle. Right. Okay.
so what happens if we have 12 snow days
Well,
or 11 snow days?
and then the board would be left with a decision, because once a student graduates, for whatever reason, PDE says you can't count them for subsidy. We'd have to double check that, but I believe that to be the case. So in many cases where you would have graduation in your own facility, you just move it back. But because we have the restriction of having to rent a facility, we'd have to think about that, because it's not something I'm familiar with.
Typically, the way that's just for context, historical context, the number of days has never really been a problem where the sticking point is days and hours. But typically in a year when there have been 11 or 12 snow days, there's typically a declaration of some sort of emergency blizzard type situation. In the past, we've run into that, and that has been forgiven by the governor. You know, these 3 days were an absolute blizzard in Pennsylvania. So in the past, if that has happened, that has always, we have never, historically run into that for those extenuating circumstance blizzard reasons.
Maybe if I could just suggest, I think obviously this is a difficult thing to create, and a lot of work has gone into it. I think it would certainly be my hope that we can approve it tonight. I think some of the issues that are being raised are things that we could maybe do at an earlier stage next year to address graduate. I have some.
Oh, sure.
I would love to see graduation come back here. I'm not a huge fan of not having graduation in your district. So there's a lot of things I would love to talk about with graduation. But again, that will just add even more problems tonight. So my point is
working on that issue along with the facility committee.
I'm not the only one working on it, sir.
Yeah. So I mean, those are things that maybe.
Yeah.
So I think my point is, I think, as I said, this isn't making everybody perfectly happy, but I do recognize how much work it is to try to get one done. I would support doing this one tonight for this year, and some of these other issues maybe we can look to address in the,
Well,
in
sure.
the fall.
And if we end up with a beautiful stadium with turf
Yes.
and beautiful lights
just gonna
and
say.
brand new bleachers, what a wonderful
I can almost,
conversation to entertain
we can almost picture it.
at that time.
Do you think we could call the question?
Call
I
the-
think we can, and I think, Dr. Shireen, we can also talk about next year how to make that spring break real for an entire week like everybody else does it.
And I mean, if you think about
So
it.
you have a year to
Well,
plan,
I'm not gonna say
okay?
think about it because I don't want to go down that road, but
I just
if
don't
you
know
look
why
at the
we
second
haven't-
is early, and then maybe next year if we had it, we could
That's
say,
fine.
let's do it the following Friday.
Mhm.
And then,
I mean, I just was asking question.
Yeah.
Really, to me, it just, I've
Okay.
always
but it can be
wondered,
done. It can
I've always
certainly be
wondered
done.
if there was a reason we
Yeah.
didn't have one.
And I think one of the days you can take right now towards that spring break, which I would fully support, having never had one at any level of school, would be the hunting day that's been preserved, even though hunting season.
Well, it did change it, though.
Hunting
That's-
season is on Saturday,
Yeah,
Jeff.
they did change it. You're right. I still like it just out of tradition.
Yeah, but,
As
okay, I'm
someone who
very
has
familiar
struggled with
that.
childcare, that was always a problem. Now my kids are.
So I'll put out maybe early September, we'll start working on the calendar.
From
for next
Western
year.
Pennsylvania, Bill. You're gonna get your card pulled. I mean, come on now.
I never hunted.
I won't.
Sorry.
But you are right. It is now Saturday opener. It really doesn't have a whole lot of.
Skeet and clay, but
Yeah.
not hunt.
Okay, are we ready, folks?
Yes.
All right, let's do a roll call.
There you go.
Mary Jo Reiner,
Approve.
Kyle Gangware. Rhea Serene,
Aye.
Emily Gaiman,
No.
Stephen Maud,
Aye.
Christopher Webb,
No.
William Lysette,
Yes.
Jeffrey Dimick,
Aye.
Nicole King.
No.
It passed. Okay, motion carries. Let's move on to.
Yes. To letter B, we request the board to approve an expulsion waiver as contained in private settlement agreement.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries.
Okay, Dr. Trinkle, curriculum, student, and staff activities.
We were looking at the student teacher and field experience agreement in relation with Bloomsburg University. They're requesting a partnership with the Sudbury High School District to support their teacher education program for both field experience and and student teaching. This is a standard template of agreement. We look forward to your consideration for approval of this partnership with Bloomsburg.
So we have a motion. Can I get a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Alex, any questions or concerns? Okay, who's in favor? Opposed? Okay, the motion for Bloomsburg carries.
Okay, Mr. Pepe, business and finance and support services, please.
Thank you. As you see, we have the audit which was already presented tonight, so we have an issue there. Also, the Lehigh Career and Technical Institute budget, appreciate the added commentary on that from our board member. Tonight on the bills list for approval, the bills list reflects annuities paid during the February 25th payroll, the amount of $1,048.70. And general fund bills totaling $448,000. I'll cover the highlights on the bills list. Apple Incorporated, you see $23,047. That represents tech equipment for M1 chips for approximately 30 MacBook Airs at $770 per unit. So that's how it grossed up into the number that you see. There's 3 property tax refunds on the agenda tonight. They will be voted separately, but they're also included in the bills list. And the reason for change is in there. They total $2,047. Boathouse Sports, $681.90, is providing new uniforms for the high school track, women's sprint tops and shorts. So we're excited about that. CM3 Building Solutions, you'll see $12,148 consisting of monthly maintenance of $1,309 for building automated system to manage our HVAC. And $10,829 is replacement of a Chase. And a Chase is basically like a CPU or central processing unit for Johnson controls. So that's the total of that group. Also, you see in there, Fenrock Landscape, $11,000. That was actually covering mulch for the entire district. That's one area where I'm looking forward to working with our new facility director to see about getting best price for either walking bids and or a contract. That's pretty much the highlights of the bills list. Are there any questions on that? Go ahead.
Could you give a little bit more detail about the Apple expenditure?
I think maybe Ken might. I just know what it is.
Sure. This is in part to enrollment pickups, and in the past with our cyber program, we have equipment from the provider from the IU. Now we supply our own technology to our students, so we found ourselves in a tight spot with the amount of devices we had at camp, so we had to add a handful of devices to sell.
Okay, so this wasn't for like a repair, it was for brand new equipment. And I may have misheard. I thought I heard chip along the way, like something inside the computer was being replaced. Okay, thank you.
I think the chip part is just in the description, but that's why I can give you the detail. Any other questions on the bills list?
Yeah, Mr. Pepe, the Southern Lehigh Public Library Association for $17,850. Can you give a little detail on that?
Sure. That's a quarterly payment. They receive approximately $70,000 to $74,000 a year in support from the school district.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to take, I need a motion for, what section? This is 7, the business and finance sections, section A. A, C, and D, I'm taking together. I need a roll call for B, so. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any questions? Did that backwards. Okay, motion carries. So we need a roll call. I need a motion for the Lehigh Career and Technical Institute budget.
Second.
Comments or questions? Anne Marie, we need a roll call.
Mary Jo Reinert,
Aye.
Kyle Gangware, Priya Serene,
Aye.
Emily Gaiman,
Aye.
Stephen Maud,
Aye.
Christopher Wayak,
Aye.
William Lysette,
Aye.
Jeffrey Deming,
Aye.
Nicole King.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Mr. Pepe, regarding the Brandywine transportation contract.
As the board's well aware, we've been negotiating the continuation of the existing contract with Brandywine, and we were able to lock into a 3-year renewal at 3%, 3%, and 3.5%. So given today's environment, that's pretty good. Superintendent and I also went through some of the other concerns that we may have to ensure accountability with fuel, because we purchased fuel, diesel. And other than that, all the terms and conditions of the contract remain to say.
And I do want to thank Mr. Pepe for his work and intervention in this. I think we were left in a spot where this was delayed in being negotiated, and we have this on our list in 3 years for us to focus on to make sure that we get a good public look at this. But given the circumstances, this is the very best we can do. And I do want to also acknowledge Brandywine Lehigh for the exceptionally good service that they provide to our district. They're long, dedicated, hardworking company, and we're very grateful to continue our partnership with them.
I need a motion to approve the Brandywine transportation contract.
Second.
Any comments or questions?
I just have a quick question. Dr. Mann, when would you generally suggest negotiations start in this type of situation, just for
I would say
future?
2 years before
2
the
years.
expiration,
Okay.
because it's a big thing to be able to change vendors and routes. So we would really need to do that long in advance of the expiration to provide the opportunity to change vendors should that be necessary. Again, recognizing that our current vendor does a very good job.
And just another question is, some districts, they own their own buses, and I know we contract out. Can you just comment on the pros and cons quickly about that?
There are districts that do their own. I think there's been more a trend toward contracting out. In doing your own, you own buses, and you have a greater cast of employees who are responsible for. You generally do your own routing for bus routes. You have your own supervisor, which would be an administrative position. On balance, and the other thing too, while there are markups certainly for vendors, public school employees have, as Mr. Pepe pointed out before, about a 35% markup on their salary because of the pension system, which creates a challenge to do things internally. That does not apply to external vendors, although external vendors have a profit requirement for their work. So I think the trend has been to outsource. That trend has been accelerated since the pension system has exploded. But either way, you can have a very good bus system. And either way, you can have a poor one. It's just a matter of making sure you stay on top of it.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the contract's approved. Motion carries.
And Mr. Pigeon, the human resources.
Good evening, everyone. So in the human resources section tonight, there are certified employees, long-term substitute, second grade at Hopewell. Classified employees, we have 2 instructional aides, both at the high school, and a clerical employee at Libertyville. And then we have extracurricular coaching staff, 3 unpaid leave of absences, and substitutes. Mr. President, if you want to do them all together, or if anybody has any questions.
We'll do them all together. Let's take a motion for human resources A through E.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Just a real quick question. So, with some of the assistant coaches, you see various percentages next to them. Can you just comment on how that's determined?
The athletic director and the coaching staff determines the amount of input somebody can put in, and that's how it's determined on their percentage. They could also garner more individuals by giving 50% to one person, 50% to another. Therefore, we have more coaches working with our students.
Great.
And our athletes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? HR motions carry. Okay.
We have, under communications, we've been notified both by the CLIU Board of Directors and the LCTI organizations, rather, that there are upcoming vacancies on their board, and we request the board to consider filling those vacancies.
So we need a nomination for representative for CLIU. Everybody speak up.
Well, I cannot make nominations.
Does somebody want to make a nomination?
So Emma, you've served on that position at the CLIU. Is that a position you would like to still serve on?
I currently serve in that position, yeah.
Yeah.
Is this working? Can you hear me over there?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
So do you want to continue?
I haven't, this has come up because my term is expiring in June, right? And no one had asked me. I thought perhaps someone else wanted to take it.
It appears that we would like
It
to
appears
nominate you,
it's
Emily.
still vacant.
It
Ms.
appears not.
Gaiman,
I have enjoyed my time serving on the IU, and I've learned a lot. In my role on the IU, my job is to represent this board. Just by virtue of the fact that, like, I wasn't. But I'm not sure that I can adequately represent the will of the board. I'm not sure that I'm tuned into it. I am not nearly as plugged in or as aware as I was as a board member previously. When Mr. Dimick, I guess it was, announced the formation of an Act 93 committee, and when the formation of the Facilities Committee was announced, those are things that I was not aware was happening until I sat at this table. I'm happy to represent the board, but given my lack of, knowledge about the direction this board wants to go, and my involvement and my information and how that's been communicated to me, I'm not sure I'm adequately informed. Perhaps someone who is more in the loop with what is currently going on the board and doesn't find out about things when they sit at this table, perhaps that would be a better choice. If you think that's not the case, and if you think we as a board can inform each other and keep myself in the loop so that I could adequately represent you, I'm more than happy to try. But my feeling currently is that I don't necessarily have enough information when I'm learning about things like the formation of committees when I come to a public meeting. I don't know that I have enough information to adequately represent the will of the board. I am always willing to represent what I think is in the best interest of students, in this case in Lehigh and Carbon counties, including the students in our own district. But I would ask this board to help its representatives and inform them. I'm happy to serve, though.
so you'll accept the nomination?
If nominated, I will accept the nomination with the caveat that I need to know what the will of the board is. I need to be more informed as a board member when I come to these meetings. That's all. That's my only request.
Okay, so heard. So Ms. Gaiman, do we have a nomination? Did you want to nominate Ms. Gaiman?
I nominate Ms. Gaiman to serve for the CLIU board.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
I was just going to ask what kind of information regarding the CLIU that you need from the board for that. I'm on the LCTI board. I'm just wondering what information you miss or need for your decisions out of curiosity. I'm just wondering what I might be missing on the LCTI board.
I think that when you sit at that table and you represent your board and you make financial decisions and you make policy decisions, you're ultimately representing what your board will think and approve. Because, for instance, very frequently, I will be, the most recent example was the, forgive me if I'm labeling this incorrectly, the support staffing negotiation that the IU reached and voted upon, and that this board then also had to approve. So I, as a board member, sat in those discussions, in those fiscal discussions, in those planning discussions, in those, also another example would be a facilities project that they're taking on at the IU. I sat in those discussions and I represented Southern Lehigh as a member on that board, knowing historically what the philosophy of this board was and the direction it was going. And I could apply that will of the board, to those decisions and represent Southern Lehigh, in addition to representing what is in the best interest of the IU.
Are the
It's more difficult to make those financial decisions, those philosophical decisions, those facilities decisions, if I'm not aware of things. I brought up specifically Act 93 Committee and Facilities because there were two recent IU decisions that were made.
But yeah, but the Act 93, you found out about when I told you and the public that it was happening, which is the way it ought to be. So if you want to have information through text message or email or anything like that,
No.
I don't think the board is interested in doing that. This board is interested in doing everything in public. And to the extent that you have questions about the CLIU, what you should do is report back on what is happening at the CLIU. And if you wonder what the guidance is of this board, you should say, this is what's happening at the CLIU. How is it that you would like me to vote? I don't think I'm more than happy to have you serve on the CLIU. I don't think it's that difficult. You come back and you report on it and you ask for guidance if you don't think you understand what this board's position is.
Jeff, what I was referring to is the general change and the general lack of information flow within the board. For example, in the past, when committees have been formed, the board in general, it was announced that for this formation of this committee is happening. Any board members who would like to be considered for appointment on this committee, please reach out.
Ms. Gaiman, I'm going to take ownership for.
No, wait. Mr.
committees.
Dimick directly addressed, and
Okay.
I'm answering. If you do not want me to serve on the IU, someone else is more than happy to
I
fill the
want
role.
you to serve on the IU.
I'm sorry, what?
But I want you to serve on the IU, and I want to answer your question about the committees.
I didn't have a question. I'm just describing, I would just like to describe
I'd
what
like to
previously
respond
happened.
to your comment on the committees that
But-
were established and
but
folks were appointed publicly
Go ahead.
to those committees per the district policy.
Yes, the policy is absolutely that the president gets to appoint individuals on a committee at, in this case, her discretion. Absolutely. In the past, Mr. Dimick, you'll agree that the board was aware if a committee was being formed. And the board was told a committee is being formed, and if you would like to be considered for, or a committee is being formed, here are the individuals who've expressed interest, or a committee is being formed, here are the people who I think would best serve because, but
Okay, Ms. Gaiman, I'm
to
going to respond.
learn about that at a
Okay.
board meeting,
I hear you.
I have tried.
Just for the record, that's not my memory in the minority on this board over a number of years, that somehow I was included in all kinds of discussions on what I would like to do on what committee. I think what you are experiencing is life perhaps in the minority on the board. And
Yes, you still had minority representation in the
just-
superintendent
No, I
search.
didn't.
Yes,
Okay, so
yes.
we could do
No.
this all night, which I don't want to
Sure,
do.
and I'm happy
No, I
to
don't want
do
to,
it.
Jeff. But what I think what she's
Well,
saying is Act 93, yes, I guess we all found out together. But the Facilities
Correct.
Committee in general, when there was a committee or when there was, for example, interviews or that type of thing happening, the entire board would find out from the president. So I mean, I appreciate, MJ, that you're taking ownership of it. I think Emily was making a point. I mean, I too have felt that way, what she's saying. So I think that maybe we could just, instead of arguing about it back and forth, just acknowledge it.
A good example of this would be, I asked to be on the pandemic team last fall, and trust me, I was not put on that. You,
The email
Dr.
went out
Serene,
to everyone,
and I
though.
asked to be on it. You can look at the
But
email.
Jeff, the
No,
email
I'm
went
happy to have this conversation.
Jeff,
If
that
all of a
email
sudden,
went out
no,
to everyone.
I
That's
am
the
happy to have
point.
this conversation. I asked to be on the pandemic team. I was told I could not be on the pandemic team. You and
No.
Dr. Serene and Anita Desai were placed on that all-important pandemic team, which then reported to us
That is
what was happening in the district, and I had no role in
The
that. So it's a
superintendent.
little rich
Okay,
for the
just
two of
since
you
you
to come
threw
to
up
the
the
board
point-
now and tell me
Wait, hold on.
otherwise.
Since you threw up, no, he put on a point which is now going to be twisted.
No, there's
The
no time.
the superintendent sent out an email regarding a
Which I
pandemic
answered.
committee. Wait, that there were 2 spots for board members. I responded, so did Anita. I'm sorry, Jeff, that you were late to the party, but we were the first 2 that emailed because we had interest in it. It wasn't because you were not being allowed to serve on it. So please don't put it in a way that is not correct.
And also.
Yes, you weren't on it, we know.
And also, what happened there was, it was, please let us know by this date. And 2 people responded by that date and time, and you did not. You subsequently, that is incorrect.
Okay, okay.
Bottom
Let's
line,
talk about moving forward here.
let's
So-
talk about moving forward, but MJ, I have brought
I'd like
this-
to finish my point. I think you made yours. Let me finish my point. So moving forward, we looked at what we needed to do to operate as a committee as a whole, in what areas, and for now, we are continuing to do that in many, many areas. we decided to carve out a facilities committee, and where we specifically need an ad hoc committee for a short-term purpose. At this point in time, I, as the board president, have no plans for any further committees. And if there is a future committee planned that we discuss with administration, or I discuss with administration, I will be sure to announce it to the entire board. Does that help? Okay, let's move on, folks. So, thank you, Ms. Gaiman, for stepping up for another term. We appreciate that. Any other comments or questions?
We need a vote.
We do need a vote.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that there were no further comments or questions. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, Ms. Gaiman will continue. Thank you.
And then LCTI is next, looking for a person willing to take on that role.
I can't take it because I'm already on it.
So we need two representatives.
Well, you're staying on it, yes? Okay, so we only need one then. We need one. We need one.
Are these the same meetings? I mean, are these two representatives attending the same meeting?
Yeah, it's a proportional board by school district. The larger school districts get more. We have two positions.
How many do how many do the
Some
larger
have
districts?
3, some have 4. I think
Okay.
Parkland has 4 and Allentown maybe 4 and Salisbury 2. We have 2, things like that. Yep.
And they have multiple subcommittees that you essentially will pick one, that one of the representatives would go on, and then the other representative could go on that same sub, or more likely go on a different subcommittee.
I'm on the education committee.
And how long are these meetings typically?
Probably 2 hours. You know, the committees meet before the joint operating committee meeting for anywhere from half hour to 1 hour. And then the meeting takes place after that, I think about 2 hours, and they have a dinner by the culinary arts students. You pick your dinner.
Oh, they
and you
feed
get
you.
that. Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting.
And,
dinner,
it
culinary
runs
arts
in a
dinner.
very organized way. They're very competent. They went through, as I mentioned to Mr. Pepe, that they did an outstanding job explaining the budget the other day, and are going through other things as well. So they're pretty efficient. But it is an in-person meeting. You can meet virtually by emergency, but generally in person.
Do I have any interest? Okay, I will
It's
join you.
once a month.
I will volunteer if I am nominated.
Quickly.
Okay.
I will nominate you, Mary
Okay,
Joanne.
thank you. Thank you, Bill, for the nomination. Okay.
At least then we'll have 2 representatives, because I literally will miss over half
Okay,
the meetings.
that's fine, Bill. Okay, great. All right. Any other comments? Okay, let's vote. Go ahead. Aye. Myself.
Aye.
Anybody opposed to my stepping up to do this with Mr. Maude? Okay.
Okay, and there are no other action items. Thank you.
And do we have any post comments? Okay, we have no comments.
There are no comments?
No.
I had one additional new business if I could.
Yeah.
I was interested in Mr. Schindler's comments this evening. I don't think they're appropriate for an open meeting, but I would ask in advance of our next executive session, I would appreciate, and I know because we have been getting outside counsel advice on this, and his time is, something that we need to value and get to in time. I would like the ramifications of a waiver of attorney of privilege. And I think also spoke about the possibility of rebuttals being made public along with the report. I'd be curious to see what Attorney Levin's thoughts are on that. And he also asked about citing specific, I guess, case law for the reasons for certain redactions if they occur. Those all three seem like wise, potentially reasonable requests. But I said, I don't think it's appropriate to speak about them here, and it's certainly not appropriate to argue or talk about them without any kind of guidance from the folks, from Attorney Lynn, who's been providing it to us. So I would, though, like to have that information at our next executive so that we may be able to make a decision on that, or at least then have a more public comment about it at our next meeting before any action on the report itself.
I agree with Mr. Dimick.
Okay.
It's time to get that wrapped up in a cohesive and correct way, but sooner than later.
And my only thought there would be, I would be uncomfortable kind of interpreting Mr. Levin's thoughts on this to the board. So perhaps we could either set up as in our executive session, or if there is interest among a majority of the board, then we could meet with Mr. Levin, perhaps remotely, in executive session, so that you're not left with me trying to interpret what is said or isn't said regarding some fairly complex issues.
Yeah, most certainly the due diligence needs to be done. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Mr. Mann. And if we can set that up actually before the next board meeting.
Sure.
I would support that, yeah.
So we're not tied to a 3-week wait. Any other business? Okay, with that, we're adjourned. Oh, if you want to vote on adjournment, I thought I can just do that.